Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. To another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This month, Creator explores trust issues. You don't have any trust issues, do you, Carl?
Well, not that I'm aware of, but but I'll tell you, I remember breaches of trust, and that tells us something. And anyone who's had a breach of trust, whether it's something they did and maybe regretted later, or was done to them surprisingly, unexpectedly by someone they counted on and believed in and trusted, it stings, it hurts, and it's a rather painful thing to go through. So those who are trustworthy are kind of special and prized and need to be, because they're the rock. They're the ones who hold things together. So we'll be talking about the ins and outs here, but this is a big topic.
Yeah, it is. And I'm delighted with the answers that came through. So I think it's definitely a good topic to get into, and we'll do that right now. U.S. creator Stephen Covey said, "Trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It's the foundational principle that holds all relationships." What is Creator's perspective?
All right. And this is what I channeled from the creator of all that is. These are Creator's words. This is not only a sign of the times, but a sign for the ages, that trust is a bedrock quality and a necessity for people to experience in order for things to flow, for things to happen, plans to be made, arranged, to be carried out, and followed through. All along the way, where people need to depend on one another, there is an element of trust involved in the interchange. This is inevitable because, especially so, because you are on the earth plane, a land of torment, a land of great negativity, and a land of high-level corruption at all levels of your culture. This may seem shocking to some. Everyone understands there is wrongdoing, that there are, in fact, criminals amongst you. But to make a sweeping indictment of the very fabric of existence on the planet seems a bit much for almost every listener. That is only because you are human and used to your environment, which you take for granted. Yours is a world of discord, disharmony, and distrust as a commonplace. The one begets the other down a long list of travails that accompany the human dilemma. This is because people are flawed. None are perfect, so there will always be room for error, misjudgment, and potential differences of opinion that may not be negotiated, but simply acted upon when one feels they have the power and control of a situation. All of these differences can be points of friction, leading to squabbles and worse, especially if there is eventually a falling out and harm comes to someone. Even a small slight can sting and remain a bone of contention indefinitely. People vary in how easily they forgive and forget on their own. Many require an act of atonement of some kind before trust can be restored and once again bestowed on a prior offender or perceived offender. It gets complicated because there is not a universal standard that applies to every situation. You are in a hotbed of competing feelings, thoughts, beliefs, and actions that have a rationale and motivation behind them, but things can never be orchestrated perfectly with perfect coordination because there's not time, nor is it usually necessary to be so punctilious about every little detail. So things will function well until a problem happens. Once a problem arises, that is when hindsight comes into play. Finger pointing may begin, accusations may be launched, and then suspicions are born about the true motives of a perceived wrongdoer, whether it is simply an oversight or something more sinister, and so on. In a world of criminals, the honest broker will often still be met with suspicion simply because it is the order of the day. The fact you are having this discussion reflects the reality we are describing for you. The trust is far from being a given, bestowed freely on any and all, because all are trustworthy, all are reliable, all are in divine alignment, and all are willing to accept you at face value and do their utmost to give of themselves to see that things work out. That is an ideal world, the world of the light being, but does not exist in the physical plane you inhabit. There are many reasons why this is so. It is a land of imperfections, incompleteness, and uncertainty that creates tension and points of difference that become points of friction all too readily. There is a heavy level of corruption from the rise of evil that has been going on since before the earth was created. Much negativity has been brought to you from other worlds, as well as a large cohort of corrupted, fallen angelic beings in spirit form who can manipulate the living to cause trouble, break rules, and encourage selfish behavior, all of which will be a breach of trust when observed by others. So, trust is much like a traffic signal. It is there to provide a potential limit, a break in functioning to allow a reassessment or a reworking of things, to provide additional checks and balances, perhaps, or even to discontinue something with the intent to find different partners before resuming course, and so on. It is the level of darkness in your midst that elevates trust to represent a premium quality, not only highly regarded, but a working practical necessity as a touchstone for guiding everything, because the level of trust involved that is appropriate will need to be established and often verified.
Wow, that's a powerful point. That Creator is essentially saying that ordinarily, especially if you're a light being, trust is a given. It's not something that has special value per se. But Creator goes out of the way to point out that on the earth, and here it does. It's a quantity of high value and something that is not taken for granted, and that's a problem in its own right. Trust should be something that should be taken for granted. It's clearly not. And then Creator also talks about how many people be surprised at how out of alignment Creator perceives Earth to be. I'm trying to be nice on that, but Creator's trying not to condemn us, but at the same time, kind of condemns the situation we're in terms of the overall trustworthiness of everything.
Well, I think the comment that it's worse than we think because
Yes.
because we're so acclimated to it, it seems like normal to us.
Right. Yeah. But from an
People are
outside
afraid to
perspective,
go outside in many areas of the world at the moment.
yeah.
If they're living in a large city, especially, and if there's high crime and all that sort of thing. And we just sort of get used to it. It's that classic description of the frog in a heated pot, that it may be complacent and it's undoing
Yeah.
because it gets used to the hotter and hotter and hotter water, and eventually it can't escape because it's too late.
Or better the hell you know than the heaven you don't. I mean, it's familiarity, right?
Yeah.
So definitely a problem. U.S. Creator George MacDonald said, "To be trusted is a greater compliment than being loved." What is Creator's perspective?
All right. Creator tells us in the earth plane, everything is conditional, everything is fragile, everything is hard won, often fought for to begin with payment of a high price. This land of imperfection you inhabit will mean automatically that all divine attributes on display will likely be imperfect, if only as to their degree. the level of vibration reached in terms of the depth and magnitude of the particular attribute in question and its expression. Trust and love are soul attributes and just words. They can be truly profound and on a divine level of authenticity, depth of expression, and level of intention when being utilized. Or they can be something done as a token, as a gesture, more in name only than a genuine expression of trust and love. This is the hallmark of the selfish or the true narcissist who values themselves above everyone else. So, no two people have an identical level of trustworthiness or love potential, and as they are regarded by others, will not be seen by any two people identically as being lovable or to be trusted. That is also a moving target. Relationships typically start slowly. Trust is given provisionally at the outset and a necessary buy in, so to speak, for further interaction to continue. It needs to be established and then may grow from there if things go smoothly. Love is a deeper quality and not given lightly as part of a contractual arrangement, for example. You do not give provisional love to others. There might be some conviviality, some congeniality in recognizing something nice about a new acquaintance, and that will get a warm feeling going, but it is still short of love. That will require the development of an investment in another person to bring with it a kind of devotion, a willingness to commit more strongly to the relationship, whether a love based romantic involvement or just good friendship. Given the imperfections of your world, there are many partnerships, including love relationships, that exist on the basis of that chemistry to provide a reward and incentive to keep going and support the relationship with love as a reward. And that is usually worth the effort because love is a basic nutrient needed by all soul based beings for optimal happiness and well being. But there are many times when love relationships run aground through disagreement, often a karmic rumbling from prior relationship difficulties, even in other lifetimes, that might be severe and make someone even a poor candidate to have a successful marriage with or a business partnership. When people have flaws that are perceivable and obvious, as with men having a roving eye, there might be true love bestowed on such an individual, but there can be an erosion of trust, if only through suspicion of wrongdoing. So the love quotient may well differ in strength from the trust quotient in a relationship. This is true of all kinds of human interactions, friendships, workmates, romantic partners, or family members. As you are exploring the dynamics of trust, there is a complex equation operating always for every person with respect to every other human interaction in their life experience. And there will be an energetic influence owing to both trust and love as attributes in play coming from both directions. Trust and love are different. Both are important and sometimes necessary for effective interactions with others. In the beginning of a relationship where love is important to be expressed, it will take time, usually, to develop and strengthen. People might wax and wane in their level of love feelings until well along the path of getting to know one another and beginning to care more deeply. Trust is a more foundational bedrock because it is more workmanlike and less emotional in nature. Love is more like a narcotic, or can be, and that can be addicting and also blinding because it is so rewarding. People will sometimes not see the truth of things in a relationship with someone who is perhaps exploiting them. So the love is more unbalanced, coming mostly from one party than from the other. Because trust is such an important foundational quality, it is prized quite highly indeed. And it is often the case that a breach of trust will destroy a relationship like a marriage, more so than an unkind and unloving mistreatment that may develop by someone being thoughtless in the moment. That can usually be forgiven more readily than breaking someone's trust. And the example we are giving reflects the fact that love is more of a variable, waxing and waning with intensity and understood to be that way. This is why partners will usually spend some time and effort thinking of ways to show their love through kind gestures, unexpected gifts, the sending of flowers, or surprising their partner with a pleasurable experience like a well planned night on the town. Whereas trust is part of the infrastructure, expected to be bedrock and steady, and thus of greater fundamental importance as a necessity for lasting relationships. As such, it is more of a test of character to be trustworthy than a lover.
Wow. I've done some looking in on this, and the statistics, the number one reason for marriage breakups, I think, is infidelity. And not all of those relationships were bad. Some people in these relationships are blindsided out of nowhere that the betrayal would happen because the person is treating them well otherwise. They're leaving chocolate on their bed, they're sending them flowers, calling them in the middle of the day, texting them all the time, and they love bombing them, essentially, is one word for it. And so the one person is completely completely floored when they discovered that infidelity has been taking place. And yet the marriage ends because none of the rest of it makes up for that lack of trust. So trust is seminal. It's important.
Well, it's a more special kind of currency
Yes.
in its value. And love is a perception, and it exists on two ends of a relationship. Someone receiving loving gestures and loving treatment may or may not be perceiving the extent and depth of that love. Just because it feels good, it's what they want, they're hungry for it, they're thirsty for it, and it's satisfying to them. But it could partly be a kind of deception.
Sure.
Or partially so, where someone loves another, but it's not felt extremely deeply. It's more of a convenience, perhaps, or something they've settled for, and so it kind of goes along under its own steam and maybe be as successful. There are lots of relationships like that where the match is not made in heaven in a sense, but it works and it gets people by and it gives them a life that's decent enough that they feel satisfied. But when something breaks down, if the trust isn't there and the trustworthiness isn't there, that puts everything at risk in a big, big way because it reveals kind of the lie that's been underway.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. Creator says that trust can be provisional, but love can't be. I thought that was an interesting line.
Yes.
You asked Creator. Frank Crane said, "You may be deceived if you trust too much, but you will live in torment if you don't trust enough." What is Creator's perspective?
Creator says, this quote is simply reflecting the fact that because trust is a fundamental necessity for human relationships to be successful and operating on the same level, it is also an expectation that one will be trusted by another party. And if they are not, it will be a serious disappointment and engender uncertainty about the value and wisdom of the relationship existing itself. It is a basic aspect of human nature that people who are distrustful of others will themselves be viewed with suspicion because of concerns they may be covering up something lacking or have an ulterior motive to perhaps exploit others. And their lack of trust is because they are after something else to begin with. So the inability to trust is seen as a kind of deficiency in the makeup. It is seen as a corollary with inner strength and with the degree of development of true character, having a requisite stability and wherewithal for people to hold their own and have something to offer because they are a force to reckon with, or at least likely to be a caring person with values and someone worthwhile to be involved with in a relationship. If people mistrust others when that is wholly unjustified, it is telegraphing an inner weakness, likely that the person cannot trust their own discernment or is impaired to some extent, perhaps by having a tough life of disappointments. But few people are looking for the walking wounded to bond with and devote themselves to a lifelong partnership with such an individual, all other things being equal. So not only will someone who cannot trust end up living in fear of those around them, they will likely be rebuffed by many, sensing something is not in place and may well be avoided because of the uncertainty they are projecting to others.
Boy, that's really a harsh statement. Few people are looking for the walking wounded to bond with. Boy, it's true, but we're all kind of think of ourselves as walking wounded. So that strikes a chord of fear even within me, Carl.
Well, it is just complicated. And, in a world of imperfection and being human, meaning automatically you're imperfect, we're all on a kind of spectrum of potential misery and failure and distrust in varying ways. So, what this represents, I think, if someone is mistrustful, and that's kind of like a characteristic for them to have that attitude, there's work to be done. And that's the
Yep.
bottom line. This is a healing opportunity that will make their life better if this can be worked on and they be raised up as a result.
And we can see some of the hazard that can contribute to the downward spiral of an individual because they've been roughed up. And so as a result of being roughed up, they don't trust. But then the fact that they don't trust means that they themselves are not trustworthy, are seen as trustworthy and undesirable. And that just compounds the situation, makes it worse.
Well, and the problem with these kinds of things is you can't go to a doctor and have them give you greater trust
Right.
in others. This requires a divine intervention, divine level healing.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and people, I think, realistically can't be faulted for looking at someone and saying, gee, that person's damaged goods.
Yeah.
And they kind of steer around them. Do you want to take on a project? You may never succeed in helping to improve, and you're living with sharing the misery it causes. I mean, This is what's at stake without healing.
Yeah, and it creates the dilemma for somebody that has the capacity to determine how trustworthy somebody is. Because if you look at somebody and you say, you know what, you're not very trustworthy, you're going to be cautious and withhold yourself from a relationship with them, and that's not doing them any good, and it's perhaps not even doing you any good. So it's a real problem, and I think one that's not really explored very well either. So maybe we're doing a service here, Carl. U.S. creator Lao Tzu said, "He who does not trust enough will not be trusted." What is creator's perspective?
Now, creator says, here you are discussing differing sides of the same coin. That trust is an expectation when it is freely given and the intentions are honorable when interacting with someone. Because the ability to trust is a sign of confidence and inner strength, someone who projects a mistrustful nature will arouse suspicion. And this is justifiably so because trust is an important foundational requisite of a healthy human in a relationship. It is always earned along the way, but there must be a provisional trust for a relationship to get going. So a relationship that begins with signs of mistrust at the outset will be seen as a red flag, a kind of warning to be wary of that mistrustful person. After all, letting someone into your life, if only in a casual way at first, may be low risk, but the risk is never zero. There are always potential pitfalls and the possibility of an ugly surprise in putting your confidence in someone being reliable and fair-minded. There is also an instinctive awareness that because trust is such an important foundational attribute and condition for smooth running human interrelationships, someone who has trouble trusting others may well not be rewarded or rewarding to invest time in getting to know them and being involved with them, and perhaps in growing ways dependent on them to be reliable, supportive, and an asset in general. So, as a general working principle, trust in others as well as being trustworthy are requisites for full acceptance by other people. While at first acquaintance, trust will be given provisionally, it must be developed and strengthened for a relationship to become a sustained and satisfying one. Otherwise, people will pull away and move on to better prospects.
This strongly reminds me of the caveat: "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." So I think that embodies the idea that trust almost by necessity has to be provisional when you're first setting up a relationship with someone, because you don't know, and you're really not supposed to know. You can't judge the trustworthiness of a total stranger with no information, no experience, no track record, etc. So trust has to be provisional in the beginning. Then if somebody violates that provisional trust, shame on them, right? It's not your failing, but you have to be able to extend the provisional trust. If you can't do that, you can't even get to square one.
Yeah, it is really quite vital. And that's the thing that's coming through here. People don't probably spend time thinking about this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like something you just sort of have an inner feel about a person, and you don't put it into a description and think about the things in terms of soul attributes on display. But this is pointing out that we're all in this dynamic with everyone we know.
Yes.
So this kind of struggle, this little bit of a tug of war, it's like, sort of like rising and falling tides. Things vary over time. The degree of closeness, and then when there are complications and frictions that develop, or just perceived neglect, maybe people get busy and they don't call, and these sort of things. Is it a threat to your trust you're placing in that person, or is there something else going on? And so these are always in play, these attributes, and
Yep.
they're all important to happiness and getting it right and figuring out how to navigate.
And no doubt about that. You ask Creator, how much is a lack of belief in the divine really a lack of trust in the divine?
All right, this is Creator's answer. Here you are tapping into an important dimension of faith and belief in us. Those two are not the same. Faith is more provisional and belief is more absolute, at least when well developed through life experience. Faith is a bridge to belief, and for many will be as far as they can go in the relationship, given we are unavailable to people directly to experience. And thus, for them, more an idea than a reality that is tangible when it comes to fellow human beings, but quite elusive when it comes to the divine and its workings. One of the biggest problems for would-be believers is developing trust in us. And that is because trust is needed for acceptance, as the same is true for a human-divine partnership. That trust will be a basic foundational requisite for a steady and rewarding relationship that is valued and counted on in being an everyday part of life and in one's awareness at intervals. Many struggle to develop a strong belief in the reality of the divine, and it is often because they feel the disconnect that is the human condition, being born with no real awareness of prior relationships, especially with the divine realm. Children must be exposed to the idea of God and taught what it is and how to cultivate an understanding and belief that will be accepted as real. That is essential to get something from the experience, because without some level of belief, we cannot interact directly, because the free will of the non-believer is telling us our coming into their awareness would be going against their beliefs, and we must follow the rules of engagement always. The fact you are in a tough testing ground due to the rise of evil, and the fact you are on your own through having free agency and free will, means we cannot intrude on your day. We cannot disturb you to tell you what to do, and we cannot do things for you except quite indirectly, mostly through inspiration, to get you to do them for yourself as a good idea. The end result of this freedom and lack of concrete evidence of our existence will likely be doubts. And in that climate, it is very difficult for people to develop trust in us when there is so much at stake in life. So many things that can go wrong, so many challenges demanding taking risks, doing hard work, often with meager reward. Many are non-believers because of the level of suffering, and to them, this is a deal breaker. If they cannot trust God to use its power on behalf of the downtrodden, that seems to warrant only one of two conclusions. Either there's no God to begin with, or the God that exists is uncaring, at a minimum aloof, or at worst, an actual source of unpleasantness and adversity to challenge and punish, perhaps on a whim. Neither profile of the divine will naturally foster trust in us. And because inadequate trust is often a deal breaker for the maintenance of a relationship, it is understandable people drift away and eventually stop seeking an interaction. And when lack of belief becomes predominant, there is no need or reason to trust at all. And all that does is add to the gap that may become unbridgeable from then on.
Wow. You know, I was taken aback by Creator saying that faith was provisional, but belief is more absolute. So that was like, that's really interesting. And it is something I've kind of played around with in my head, that you do have to take a step forward to meet the divine. You know, God is waiting for us to make the move, right? So that provisional act of the leap of faith, it's interesting. It's called a leap of faith and not a leap of belief, Carl. I think that's an interesting distinction.
Yes. And the consequences of having some faith and maybe not much belief will be a withholding of trust,
Yeah,
because trust is provisional for most people, at
right.
least at the outset of a relationship. And if it doesn't progress far enough along, it may remain a provisional arrangement.
Yeah,
And so when things are going great, one doesn't worry about their standing spiritually and whether God is alive and well and doing what it needs to do. They're okay, and they don't have emergencies in need of divine intervention. But when something goes wrong, then the doubts loom larger.
yeah,
And that erodes trust and will threaten belief and keep it from consolidating. So there may be a little bit of faith left, but not enough to work with to really get a meaningful and effective partnership with the divine going. That needs to be the goal.
yeah,
And creators talked about this many, many, many times. This is our charter, to form a partnership with the divine and do great works, to be in charge of our world and make it a better one.
yeah.
And we have to be in the lead. And that it just puts all the burden on us, and we don't think that way. We want someone else to come in and save us all the time. And if we don't trust in that power even, how is that going to happen?
Yeah. And it's funny because I've done quite a deep dive on atheists and their thought processes, and I've said, prick an atheist, and you're going to get somebody that's angry at God, not so much disbelieves in God, but it's like, I have nothing to do with this guy. It's a deal breaker, as Creator says. That look at the world and how screwed up it is. This is on God's watch. I don't know what's going on with this dude, but he's not. He's slacking. And there's anger there. So. This idea of being able to distrust the divine is going to destroy belief at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that Kennedy, JFK inaugural address. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We could turn that into a get wisdom mantra here. Ask not what God can do for you,
right?
But ask what can you do for God.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's the message we're bringing to the world. That's not one the world is used to hearing.
Well, this is a partnership.
Yes.
That means both parties, both partners somehow have to be involved, have to trust, have to like each other enough to do it, and be effective by giving of themselves.
Yeah. And both have to be able to give trust provisionally. And I think there's no problem for the divine to give trust provisionally. The problem is on our side of the equation.
Yes.
You ask Creator, it is clear that many regard trust as something that happens to or for them, as if they had no control over how much or how little to trust. Others see trust as an art of living skill that is wise to consult, but not the decision maker. That trust can be overridden by choice and is ultimately unavoidably fraught with risk. So words are interplayed there. So you can make a choice to trust, and you can do that while at the same time understanding you're taking a risk in doing so, is the point trying to be made here. What is Creator's perspective?
Creator answers, this is accurately reflecting that for many, thoughts and feelings are experienced passively, without much inner reflection or a deeper pondering of possibilities. When someone will take stock of things and perhaps come to the realization there is work to do to regain a closeness. If one is in a relationship with a person who is strong, confident, energetic, and outgoing, that person might take the lead and work on the relationship in a way that brings out trust in the other party, because they become satisfied along the way through the open and bold interactions of that person in the lead, and come to trust they are being genuine. But there are many, many lost opportunities when relationships that begin with hesitation simply fade away. There needs to be an exchange of energy in some way or another to provide that provisional trust, like a firm handshake that sets a tone of welcoming, conviction, and expectation that something meaningful is taking place in the initiation of an exchange of some kind. There are many ways people signal those kinds of intentions, and all will build and add to provisional trust as a kind of ongoing reassurance, and will give a strengthening to a growing bond that is energetically according between the parties. That connection is a deep one and can be rewarding and take on an increasing importance in providing stability and meaning to the interchange. That too is a requisite for maintaining and building trust. As always with soul attributes, there will need to be some intention behind them to be acted upon and felt by another. Too great hesitation in a passive role creates a kind of vacuum of uncertainty, and may be enough of a roadblock to further progress that the relationship will die on the vine, so to speak. So this is simply an important mechanistic way to build friends and influence people. If nothing else, greeting people with a smile and a handshake is a vote of confidence being extended, a provisional trust on display, and that will usually be felt as flattering and reassuring because all recognize the value of being accepted by others. So such signs of friendship will almost always be welcome and will foster progression of a meaningful closeness when that is desired to be developed and maintained. Those unable to do so will be at a disadvantage and might well end up on the sidelines too much to get the most out of life they could otherwise, with a more open, optimistic, or even bold outreach to at least show an equal enthusiasm, if not be in the lead oneself in reaching out to another to get things started.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of experience with those. But this idea that, I don't trust you and it's not my fault. I think the message is, well, to some extent it kind of is, because again, trust is provisional, and you can make the provisional offer of trust even if you feel that you're not being able to, that you're having difficulty trusting. We can appreciate the fact that you have difficulty trusting, but if you take the attitude that, hey, I don't trust and it's not my fault and there's nothing I can do about it, then you're not, you're painting a pretty lonely picture for yourself there, Carl.
Well, it's sort of like making a compromise unilaterally at the outset.
Yeah.
I'm going to get just so close to you and no closer. And people will pick up on that.
Oh, yes.
And they may well mirror that. And then that's doomed, that relationship. So these are important dynamics.
Absolutely. You ask Creator, when is refusing to trust a karmic misstep? What can Creator tell us?
Creator says, the purpose of life is an expansion of possibilities in which individual soul-based beings participate in a healthy interchange. That will involve both giving and receiving of many things through a series of interactions with others in a variety of intentions, opportunities, and conscious decisions made to mount various activities and projects for collaboration and engagement. Sending your energy into the world will have consequences, and that ultimately has a karmic signature, good or bad or neutral, associated with what takes place. The law of karma will see you are rewarded through good deeds and gestures, and will have a kind of debt to pay, perhaps in an undergoing punishment or backlash for wrongdoing of any kind that departs from good divine alignment. This is true of treatment of the self as well as others. This is a huge source of grief and disharmony experienced, often on a lifelong basis, by many who have come from prior lifetimes of self-denial, perhaps from bitterness over failures. This will create a lack of trust in the self, and that can be disabling because it is just as damning and damaging as not being able to trust others or to be trusted by others and shunned instead. There are many, many people who shun themselves, in effect, because of past failure, and they've given up on relying on themselves to solve their problems and find a way forward, which could bring a solution for their suffering. So in the basic equation, energetically, the giving and receiving of love is the central currency that measures everything that happens. The level of vibration is what counts, whether lofty or lowly in nature. A love vibration will be amongst the highest of vibrations. The lack of trust is a rejection and automatically holds a low vibration, whether justified or not, because it is a recognition of something incomplete, something inadequate, and possibly a risk to others or the self. At a minimum, being unable to trust others will thwart many possible positive life experiences, keep a person on the sidelines, and stunt their growth as a consequence. All are karmic missteps because your responsibility is to the care and feeding of your soul. Anything that limits your soul expression and denies an opportunity for happiness is a kind of transgression, even when it is a lost opportunity and not a directly harmful act of wrongdoing that is hurtful in the moment. Not trusting yourself or others is a withdrawal of your energy from the playing field, a disengagement, and the consequences will be recorded in the Akashic records because it will be accompanied by a low vibration from being out of divine alignment, and thus constitutes a kind of wounding that will remain on the record going forward. And the law of karma will demand restitution. All too often, someone with an inner weakness, like an inability to trust, will be challenged again and again by the law of karma to give them an opportunity to grow those muscles. If they fail to do so, there will be a comeuppance of some kind, and that will result in suffering, and that will compound in turn the size of the karmic obligation that will continue building until there is an eventual healing brought to bear. That can mount from lifetime to lifetime in a growing obstacle to progress that gets harder and harder to surmount. This is why karma is important, and karmic consequences need to be kept in mind and addressed to see things are rebalanced and put right. That will pay many dividends.
Wow. We ask creators, is not being able to trust a karmic misstep, and creator's response is, darn right it is.
Yes.
It's a big one, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think about the sort of classic archetype of the wallflower.
Yeah.
Someone who wants to participate, they go to the dance or whatever the gathering might be, but then they end up hanging around the edges and not really launching in and interacting with others, and they're just sort of meek and intimidated. And what what is the outcome? Usually it is a self-fulfilling prophecy that by not engaging, they don't get engaged with. So this applies in how you view the world and view yourself, how you treat yourself as much as others. And not having trust sets you up for failure.
Carl, I know you channel, and you've been talking to my mother, haven't you? Talking about wallflowers. My high school dance experience, you just described that to a T.
Well, hey, been there, done that. What can I say? I've tried just about everything in life, but so far I've avoided criminal entanglements. So that's all to the good.
Yeah, so far so good.
So far so good.
You ask creator. Harry I. Stimson said, the chief lesson I have learned in a long life is that the only way you can make a man trustworthy is to trust him. And the surest way to make him untrustworthy is to distrust him. What is creator's perspective?
All right, creator says, this is a literal description of the karma involved with trust and lack of trust, that the latter attributes, lack of trust, put into practice will have a karmic consequence, always. It is not always easy to tell when trust is warranted to avoid a reckless disregard for warning signs and sensible prudence in not taking risks from falsely placed trust. In life, everything matters and everything counts, and it is all on the record. So this description is a kind of corollary of the golden rule. Do unto others what you would have them do unto you. It recognizes that trust is provisional at first and earned through judicious and timely positive actions. So often the best way to get something you want from another person is to give them some of that first, to set an example by taking the risk yourself. And that will build confidence in the other party, seeing your openness in a positive light as being willing to give of yourself, and will see it as a demonstration you are trustworthy in all likelihood, and that is a good way to start things off. So this quote reflects the beneficial aspects of having a positive attitude and a good-natured feeling when interacting with other people. Not everyone is a people person, someone who is gregarious, quite outgoing and jovial, but most know how to be congenial being cordial enough to be welcoming and accepting and signaling an awareness of social niceties. That is a gesture of respect and will be trust building in the doing. It is part of human nature to want to get along and be accepted. Someone who sets the tone by taking the lead and goes out of their way to signal trust and acceptance and making the acquaintance of someone is doing most of the work, and that will be noticed and appreciated. Many will find it quite reassuring that here is someone who is looking forward to getting to know them, and that can be a great way to give reassurance and will help people loosen themselves up and engage. And that is when an exchange will be more likely to lead somewhere that is beneficial for both parties because it starts getting some chemistry going, if only as a general social lubrication intended to put one's best foot forward, not necessarily with high expectations of a mutual benefit, but at least acting as though that is possible and wanting to see what can develop and giving a relationship a chance. So, this is one powerful way to gain acceptance and then trust of another person, to show evidence you are willing to do that on their behalf at the outset and take a leadership role in doing so. Oftentimes, that reassurance will help build a true and even lasting bond, unless something happens to cause one or the other party to reconsider.
This reminds me a little bit of the saying that trust is difficult to build and easy to lose. But it emphasizes that things that are often difficult have high reward value, And so this creator is saying it's worth the effort to try to build the trust, and be provisional. Put yourself out there, take the risk. But at the same time, there has to be some reciprocation eventually. So it's a powerful lesson.
Yeah, and it makes sense. We're seeing again and again in this discussion with Creator how valuable trust is as a commodity, as a force, as a defining characteristic. So to project yourself as being able to trust and looking trustworthy in the bargain makes you look good, makes you look valuable because you're displaying something everyone wants.
Yeah.
Everyone wants the trust of others because it makes them secure, if nothing else.
Yeah.
And it's the necessary starting point for something more. So this is good advice for sure.
Absolutely. For sure. U.S. creator Samuel Johnson said, "It is better to suffer wrong than to do it, and happier to sometimes be cheated than not to trust." What is Creator's perspective?
Creator says, here again is a quite powerful testament to the importance and value people place on having that bedrock of trust on display. Morality is a necessity for being and remaining in divine alignment. So a transgression of some kind that would threaten an established trust or prevent its development will likely lead to rejection and may become an insurmountable obstacle to any further interaction. On the other hand, if you are mistreated by someone unthinkingly or carelessly, perhaps because of meeting them while they're under stress in some way and not showing their best side, if they come to regret that introduction, you will have the opportunity to decide whether to trust them and not be at their mercy. If you are the perpetrator, this is an important working principle because many people are unforgiving by nature, having been burned more than once by life, and have a low tolerance for mistreatment from others. So if you burn bridges to others, they may never reform. If you are more in divine alignment and stronger as a result, you may find a valid reason to overlook or forgive an awkward beginning and give a relationship a chance. So taking the high road is always a good policy because you will have greater strength as a result and be in the driver's seat and able to make effective choices in how to spend your time and who to do it with, and not living subject to the whims of others and their judgment of you.
That's something that I try to really emphasize myself as a personal value. And that is not burning bridges. I really try to go out of my way to not burn bridges with people. And if I do kind of sort of burn them, I don't tell them I'm burning them. So I've cut people off, but I don't tell them I'm cutting them off. I've never looked somebody in their face and said, I can't be your friend anymore. But I know people do that, and they actually do it a lot. So, but that's the kind of provisional thing again, right? I'm provisionally not burning the bridge because I might want to walk back over that bridge someday. And if you burn it down, the trust is destroyed. Yeah, it's hard to cross that river again.
Yes, absolutely.
You ask Creator, how much is trust a learned skill versus a healing need? Can Creator share with us how empowered prayer, the Lightworker healing protocol, deep subconscious mind reset, and divine life support can help us not necessarily trust more or less, but rather wisely and in just the right amount?
All right, Creator says, what we would say is trust is much more a function of stability and likely a healing need than simply a talent or skill that might be polished to a greater or lesser degree and simply needs some more work to be shored up when in short supply. Trust is more an instinct than a choice. It is a feeling as well as an inner capability that is tied to many inner beliefs on a subconscious level. So it is not possible to simply decide to trust someone consciously and then simply proceed efficiently and effectively because everything will fall into place automatically. Trust has a number of interconnected beliefs and will inevitably be influenced by numerous cordings to times and places and individual events and influencers where trust became an issue and things went wrong. The energetic signature of those events will constitute a wounding and be recorded in the Akashic records. So, whenever an issue of trust arises, it will often trigger a karmic reawakening of similar episodes. And if there's been a past trouble, there will be a rising wave of negative energy that threatens a current circumstance with becoming contaminated energetically to thwart progress by dragging things down and throwing roadblocks in the way because of fear, anger, or other negative emotions that are triggered to develop. That is a classic healing need on display that is often not appreciated consciously. Many times there will be a deep reaction or aversion to something that will not be understood consciously and only experienced as anxiety or other negative feelings. And the person will be quite in the dark about what is truly wrong and what to do about it. This disconnect is a fundamental dilemma across the board with everything that happens in life, but as a fact of your existence, you have to reckon with. So we will use this opportunity to point out to you that nothing can be taken for granted. Whenever there is wrongdoing, a deficiency, an inadequacy, a poor choice or decision that has an undesirable consequence for the self or others, there will need to be a healing to counteract those consequences. Ignoring it, trying to shove it under the rug, so to speak, and looking the other way will not get you off the hook. The law of karma will rub your nose in it one day. And much of the adversity and struggle of life is the fact people are bumping into their mountain of unhealed karmic trauma, but do not realize the source of their suffering because the details are not consciously perceived. So understanding is not possible. Fortunately, appeals to the divine for healing help can bring relief and is really the only feasible way to reconnect to prior trauma in a way that allows setting it right. Only the divine realm can go across time domains into other lifetimes or back into the early childhood in the current life and change something fundamental that took place and heal it through repairing the energetic signature registered along with the recorded event in the Akashic records. That is true and complete healing and can only be done in a limited way through the conscious self, because so much is out of reach of normal awareness. Those deeper influences, however, will be connected to the body through cordings and will stir up many negative feelings and perhaps get physical maladies going, because the cells and tissues become stressed and subjected to alteration of function that will have consequences. Most physical illness, 94%, is karmic trauma revisiting a person and causing a negative state of being in the physical body. This is what divine intervention is for, to help right the wrongs of history affecting an individual. That in turn will link to many others, and that is part of the healing through these advanced comprehensive healing protocols, that they work not only across timelines, but reach beyond the individual client to work on all who are a part of their lives, having an impact on a problem that has been brewing and bursting forth now in the current life. This is not only an opportunity for greater happiness, well-being, and longevity, but an urgent necessity to ensure your future. Our plan for you is to become motivated to attend to your personal healing and development as a consequence, so that a grand ascension of humanity can take place, with all of you moving into a higher plane of existence and leaving the physical forever. Your existence is only a start, a proving ground, a temporary state of existence to test your mettle and allow you to take on challenges and learn through adversity how to prevail and advance. You are all on a journey. Where you go will depend largely on how you choose to get there.
You know, I think it's interesting that Creator came up with the 94% of all of our difficulties are karmic trauma from basically past lives, not even from this life. And I think that's basically saying the same thing about trust. Probably 94% of our innate trust issues stem from deeply embedded trauma that we don't have direct access to. We don't even know the root cause of or where it's coming from, but it's rumbling in our deep subconscious, and it's causing trouble for us. And the only way to really get at that and really heal it is with the Lightworker Healing Protocol and the other healing modalities. We have to get wisdom, Carl.
Yes, and this is why all of the kind of self-help approaches and therapeutic approaches, or presumed therapeutic approaches, that involve counseling and coaching and talk therapies and insight therapy and so on, are all well and good, because they help circle around the problem and define things better and create a wake-up call for many to realize, there's deep issues going on and that sort of thing. But they're not powerful enough to change inner beliefs and corrupted inner hardwiring through beliefs that are contaminated and damaged through negative trauma, perhaps in other timelines you're completely oblivious to, but yet are throbbing. So this is serious. You need divine partnership and healing to be the best you're capable of.
And you can get started on that healing journey at getwisdom.com. Check out our homepage and our menu, where we have pages for all the services we provide. We've got the Get Wisdom database, Divine Wisdom database, that where thousands of creator channelings are there. There's a whole journey to embark on, and it's not a short one. It's a cross-country one, Carl. Take it today. Go to getwisdom.com. That's all we have for this month's Get Wisdom Live. Thanks, everybody.
Be well.